The storm didn't knock, it roared. Snow hurled itself sideways across the frozen sky like a living thing enraged, pounding against the reinforced walls of Elrich Ward's cabin with a fury that seemed personal. The wind howled through every crack and seam like a beast denied entry, sharp and shrill, rattling the vents and icing over the last of the exposed solar panels. The walls groaned in protest, every board and bolt trembling beneath nature's cold insistence. Inside, the heat core hummed, its steady mechanical purr, the only defiance against the chaos outside. Orange firelight flickered against stone walls, worn smooth by time and solitude, casting long shadows that danced across the rough flooring like ghosts. Elrich sat in the center of it, all broad-shouldered, still, hands wrapped around a tin cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago. He didn't drink it. He rarely did. The cup was more ritual than refreshment, a weight to hold while the silence did its slow work. He had come to Veltuan 5 for this silence, chosen it, fought for it. Even after the war, after the screaming stopped and the orders ceased, silence was the only thing that didn't talk back. It didn't ask questions. It didn't judge. It didn't sound like collapsing bunkers or men dying in his arms. Silence was a mercy, but tonight the silence felt heavier than usual, more aware, as if it too waited for something. His eyes drifted to the coat rack by the door, where a battered old military satchel hung untouched for years. The insignia was half burned, the clasp frayed, its contents long forgotten. But his gaze didn't linger there long. A new sound had entered the storm, a knock-dot so faint it could have been imagined. Then again, louder. A second knock, followed by a dull, slumping thud, like something or someone had collapsed against the door. Elrich stood slowly, the way a man moves when every instinct is waking at once. He tossed on his thermal coat, its thick lining crackling with age, and reached for the revolver mounted on the wall. The metal was cold, familiar. His hand closed around it, like a handshake with an old friend. He approached the door with caution, sharpened by memory. There were no neighbors, no patrols, no lost hikers. Not out here, not on Veltuan 5. Anyone knocking on his door in this storm meant trouble. He unlocked the triple seal mechanism, braced his weight, and cracked the door open. His breath caught. 3 figures stood in the blizzard dot. The wind tore at them, savage and merciless, but they didn't retreat. The one in front, a woman, tall and too thin, stood shaking. Her skin, a pale icy blue, stretched taut over sharp features. Her long white hair streamed behind her, like silk shredded by the storm. Her golden eyes blinked against the snowlight, unblinking and too bright dot, and at her feet, clinging to her legs, were 2 children. Small, frail, blue-skinned like her. One, perhaps 6 years old, tried to shield the smaller child with his thin arms, though he himself looked moments from collapse. Elrich didn't move. He'd seen things in war that defied logic, but this wasn't something he had a name for. Then the woman spoke. Her voice was cracked, raw, but steady. "I will warm your bed, human. My children need a father." The sentence hung there, carved into the storm. There was no seduction in it, no bargaining, only exhaustion, only desperation. Elrich blinked. The boy lifted his head. His lips were blue. His voice was choked. "We haven't eaten for 2 suns," he said in halting common. "But Mama said someone kind would help." The girl barefoot looked up at him, eyes too big for her tiny face. Her breathing was shallow. Her toes were purple. "Do you have soup, mister?" she asked. "Mama said warmth comes from kind people." Elrich tightened his grip on the doorframe. He was not a kind man, not anymore, but even he had limits. He lowered the revolver. "Get in," he said hoarsely. "Now." The woman hesitated, just a heartbeat. Then she pushed the children forward. They stumbled over the threshold, collapsing near the heat core, still clutching each other like lifelines. The woman entered last, silent, and shut the door behind her. And just like that, the storm stayed outside, but everything inside began to change. Asterisk, the silence inside the cabin didn't return immediately. It shifted uneasy, unsettled-like. Something woken from deep sleep. The children's breaths came in fast gasps, steam rising from their mouths as they pressed as close as they dared to the humming heat core. The boy wrapped his arms around his sister, his body trembling violently, but he didn't let go. The girl, Tiva, the boy would later say, made no sound at all. Her eyes blinked slowly, lashes crusted with ice, but she didn't cry. She just breathed shallow and fast and stared at the orange glow like it was a sun. The woman remained standing. She didn't speak. She didn't meet Elrich's gaze. Her shoulders were pulled tight beneath her tattered coat, which was nothing more than patchwork cloth and desperation. Snow still clung to the folds of it. Her hands, blue-tinged and raw, hung motionless at her sides. She looked like a sculpture carved from frost and endurance. Elrich didn't ask questions. Not yet. He moved to the cupboard, muscles tight with old injuries and older instincts, and retrieved a pot of leftover stew. He heated it in silence, his body moving on memory, while his mind worked furiously to keep the storm outside from becoming the one inside. 3 bowls. Not 4. He hadn't made 4 in years. He handed the first to the boy. The child took it like it might vanish. The second to the girl. She blinked, too stunned to speak, but cradled it with both hands, holding it like it might warm. Then her fingers. The third he offered to the woman. She didn't reach for it right away. Her eyes flicked to his just once and then down again. When she took the bowl, she held it close to her face and breathed in the scent, slow and shaking. A whisper of sound caught in her throat, but she swallowed it. Only then did Elrich speak. You got names? The boy glanced at the woman, and up at Elrich. I'm Shello, he said carefully. My sister's Tiva. She's 4. He didn't say the woman's name. Elrich didn't press. Tiva took a bite of stew too fast. She choked, gasped, and spilled a bit on her lap. Her mother moved instantly, panic flashing through her like a live wire, but Elrich was already there, kneeling beside the girl with a cup of water. His voice was low, steady, worn smooth from years of field trauma. Okay, he murmured, just swallowed wrong. The woman took the cup with shaking fingers, helping her daughter drink. Her eyes didn't leave Elrich's hands, as if she were waiting for them to shift to strike, to change. Tiva coughed once more, and then looked up at him. You have a crack on your face, she said, pointing to the long scar that ran from Elrich's brow to the curve of his cheek. Someone break you? She asked, serious as only children can be. He exhaled a breath that was almost a laugh. Yeah, he said. A long time ago. She nodded solemnly. Mama has cracks too, but hers are on the inside. That one landed harder than he expected. Elrich rose slowly and backed away. He retreated to his chair, gripping the arms as if anchoring himself. The flames from the burner cast flickering shapes across the floor. The girl leaned into her brother. The boy's hand never left her shoulder. The woman placed her empty bowl on the floor. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for something, an answer, a reason, maybe an escape. She moved to the farthest corner, laid out a thin, threadbare blanket, and began preparing to sleep on the stone floor. You don't have to do that, Elrich said, voice roughened by disuse. The bed's warm. She didn't look at him. Her voice was barely audible. You didn't accept my offer. I didn't need it, he said, after a long pause. I saw the girl's feet. There was silence, and then a reply that cut. clean through the quiet. Others needed more than feet to open their doors. It wasn't bitter, just tired, just truth. Elrich didn't answer. He just stared at her. At the way she sat upright, alert, like a soldier bracing for a blast. Eventually, he stood, walked over, and extended a hand, not to touch, not to command Dot to offer. "The bed's warm," he said again, more gently this time. "That's not an invitation. It's survival." She looked at the hand like it was something she hadn't seen in years, then nodded once. She moved to the bed and laid down stiffly, her back to him. She didn't reach for him, didn't speak. After several minutes, in the dark, her voice came again. "I don't expect anything from you," she said, "but thank you. For the heat, for the food." Elrich stared at the ceiling, his body tense and foreign in his own bed. He hadn't expected company. He hadn't wanted it, Dot, and yet, in the cold silence of Veltuan 5, there were now 3 more heartbeats echoing against the storm, Dot, and for the first time in years. He didn't mind the noise. Asterisk, the storm had buried the cabin by morning, smothering it beneath drifts so thick the windows admitted only the faintest suggestion of light. Outside, the world was a silent, featureless shroud, no sky, no path, no direction. Just white, as far as the eye couldn't see Dot inside. The silence had changed again. It wasn't empty now. It pulsed, quiet but full-filled with the soft rhythm of 3 new lives. Elrich was already awake, seated at the table, slowly stirring a pot of reheated porridge. His eyes weren't on the food. They kept drifting toward the far side of the cabin where the woman slept, if sleep was the right word for it. She lay curled on the very edge of the bed, back turned, limbs drawn inward like someone waiting to be struck. Her children were wrapped in his old blankets beside her, breathing softly, lost to exhaustion. The boy, Shello, kept a hand resting on his sister's back, even in sleep, like he feared she'd vanish if he didn't. Tiva's face was buried in the blanket, her tiny hand peeking out, curled gently around nothing at all. Elrich hadn't slept. His body had rested, slumped half upright in the chair, but his mind had roamed too far. It had wandered through deserts and bunkers, through screams and farewell whispers. And now it lingered on a sentence that wouldn't stop echoing. Others needed more than feet to open their doors. She hadn't said it to hurt him. That was what made it worse. He rose quietly and moved toward the main vent, checking pressure readings, listening to the soft mechanical hum. But when he passed the bed, she stirred. Her eyes opened halfway, golden and glassy in the dim light. She didn't flinch this time. She didn't reach for her children or recoil. She just watched him, wordless. He nodded once. She blinked, then slowly sat up, movements careful and tight, like someone stretching sore bones. "You should eat," he said, nodding to the pot. She hesitated, as if unsure whether this was a trick or a test. Then she rose, crossed the cabin, and sat opposite him at the table, not close, not far, just cautious. He handed her a bowl. She took it with both hands and lifted it to her lips too quickly. She coughed, caught herself, then slowed. Her eyes never left the bowl. "My name is Matsari," she said after a long silence, so softly it could have been mistaken for breath. "Elrich," he replied. "I know." That stopped her. She looked up, startled. "How? You read the outpost files?" he said. "Didn't you?" She lowered the bowl slightly. They weren't encrypted. "Before the evacuations, I scanned what I could. It said 1 human remained. Ex-military. Caution advised." His brow furrowed. "That was years ago." "But you're still here," she said. Elrich leaned back in his chair. "You came looking for me?" "No," she said, glancing toward the sleeping children. "I came looking for somewhere the storms wouldn't find us." Somewhere no one would. That answered one question. Maybe not all of them. You're running, he said. I'm hiding, she corrected. The heater groaned beside them as it fought against the cold pressing in through the walls. Elrich stood, filled 2 cups with warmed water, and handed one to her. She took it with a small nod. Her hands trembled, just enough to betray how thin her strength had stretched. What happened? He asked, not like a soldier, not like a judge. Just a tired man asking another. She didn't meet his eyes. My mate died during the war, she said. We were bonded. That's more than marriage for us. When he died, something in me broke. And in my people's eyes, that meant I was incomplete, no longer whole. Elrich didn't speak. He let her fill the silence. I tried to raise the children alone. I bartered. I worked. But a lone woman, especially one with offspring, is considered unstable. In some provinces, that means unclaimed, unprotected. Her voice caught just briefly. They said I was an invitation. She didn't need to explain what came next. Elrich had seen that look before on faces too young, too old, too tired. Her hands clutched the cup tighter. I said no. It didn't matter. It never mattered. She finished her stew, setting the bowl down gently, as though breaking it would be the last straw. That's why I said what I said that night. Not because I wanted to, because it's worked before. Her golden eyes lifted to meet his. I'm sorry. Elrich shook his head. Don't be. Masari exhaled a breath she'd been holding for hours. Behind them, a small voice piped up. Is there more soup, Mr. Elrich? Tiva stood beside the bed, wrapped in one of his thermal blankets like a tiny ghost. Her bare feet curled against the floor. Elrich rose without thinking, filled another bowl, and knelt beside her. He handed it to her with both hands. She smiled, wide and proud. Matsari was already there, crouching beside her. Slow, Tiva, it's hot. Tiva nodded, blew on the bowl with an exaggerated puff, and looked up at Elrich. Can I call you Papa? Elrich froze. If you say no, she added quickly, I'll wait until you say yes. Matsari's eyes widened in horror. Tiva, but Elrich didn't interrupt. He crouched, met her eyes, and said softly, You can call me whatever makes you feel warm. She nodded once, decided, and wandered over to sit near the heat core. Cello stirred next, blinking sleepily. When he saw Elrich, he straightened, alert. Is she bothering you? He asked quickly. She talks a lot. She's fine, Elrich said, standing. You hungry? Cello hesitated, then nodded once. I'll get you some. Matsari watched him quietly. She didn't just mean your face, she said, her voice low. When she said you had cracks inside. Elrich glanced at her. She sees things, Matsari whispered. Things others don't. He didn't reply. He just ladled out another bowl and handed it to the boy. And for the first time in years, he realized the cabin didn't feel quiet anymore. There was still silence, but it was full. And breathing. Asterisk, the storm had softened. It hadn't stopped not on Veltuan 5, but its claws no longer raked across the roof like fury. The snow pressed against the windows now, not with violence, but with weight, thick and unmoving, like the world itself had curled into sleep. Inside the cabin, morning crept in with a hush. There was no golden light, no sunrise, only a shift in gray, a softening of shadow, a subtle warmth that began not at the heater, but in the quiet breath of a space finally shared. Elrich stirred. The pot of porridge with one hand, the other resting on the lip of the counter. The children were still asleep. Tiva sprawled with her legs tangled in one of his thermal shirts, her doll pressed beneath her chin. Cello, as always, half curled around her, one arm draped protectively, his face tense even in rest. Matsari moved behind him, silent on bare feet. She offered a soft nod as their eyes met. And then she began sorting clean linen at the table, folding each piece with the kind of care usually reserved for wounds. It wasn't a morning filled with purpose. That was the miracle of it. No alarms. No hunger pangs. No scrambling to survive. Just the soft, strange rhythm of a day that demanded nothing. Tiva was the first to speak. As always, is it food time or feet time? She asked from beneath the blanket. Elrich arched an eyebrow. Feet time? She sat up, yawning. One of the outpost shuttles smelled like food and feet. It was confusing. Porridge, Elrich said dryly. No feet. Oh, Tiva said, disappointed. I liked the mystery. Cello sat up with a grunt, rubbing his face. She means she wants jam. There is no jam, Elrich replied. Not yet, Matsari said from the corner, smirking faintly. Tiva climbed onto the bench beside her brother, still wearing her splint, dragging her doll by the leg. What's for breakfast, doll? She asked it solemnly. Oh, porridge again? Brave. Elrich set bowls down in front of each of them. Tiva wrinkled her nose. Cello didn't speak. He rarely did at meals, but he gave a small nod and immediately began to eat. Matsari sat across from Elrich, her fingers lingering just a second too long on the ceramic bowl he passed her. Their hands brushed. Neither pulled away. I used to hate mornings, she said quietly. Elrich glanced at her. Too loud. Too much to do. Always a line, always a list. She stirred her porridge. But this feels like something soft. He didn't reply, but he didn't need to. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was easy. After breakfast, Matsari cleaned the dishes, humming a soft tune in her language, something lilting and strange, like river water moving over stone. Tiva hummed along off-key while she tried to wrap her doll in one of Elrich's socks. That's your only warm pair, Matsari warned. It's itchy, Tiva said, but perfect for Dolly's soul. Asterisk cello carved wood nearby, tongue between his teeth in concentration. The small figure he worked on had arms now, lopsided but present. A scar was etched across one side of its face. Elrich noticed. He didn't say anything, but something tugged at the corner of his mouth. Later, they all gathered near the heater. Again, the four of them forming a quiet shape that barely spoke, but filled the room all the same. Matsari didn't go to the corner that night, didn't lay her threadbare blanket on the stone. She stood beside Elrich, waited. He said nothing, just turned down one side of the bed, then stepped aside. She lay beside him, this time facing him. Her eyes were open, golden and dim in the low firelight. You didn't ask me anything today? She whispered. Didn't need to. She nodded. It was a good day. It was, Elrich said. And it wasn't because anything happened. It was because, for once, nothing did. No fleeing, no fear. Just warmth, just breath, just the slow, extraordinary miracle of peace. A day that asked nothing and gave everything. Asterisk, by the time the first patches of green peeked through the thawing, frost, Veltuan 5, had already begun its quiet transformation. The change didn't arrive with fanfare or sunrises. It came like everything else on this frozen world. Slow, subtle, and easily missed if you weren't paying attention. But Elrich Ward noticed. It was in the way the snow no longer howled, only sighed. In the way the solar panels finally held charge through a full cycle. In the way Matsari no longer jumped at every creak in the walls. And in the garden, what had once been the scrap field behind the cabin was now a garden uneven, messy, alive. It hadn't started as anything more than a patch of stubborn soil and a handful of expired seed packets sealed in some old outpost crate. But Cello had cleared the stones. Elrich had built a crude fence from broken insulation panels. And Tiva had named every single seedling. That one's Bronto, she declared one morning, pointing to a short, squat vine of curling firefruit. Elrich, tell her plants don't have names, Cello muttered, elbow deep in dirt. They do now, Elrich said, deadpan. Bronto needs watering. Tiva beamed. Cello groaned. Mazar, standing nearby with her hands full of harvested greens, looked across the garden at Elrich. Her hair was tied up in a loose braid now, white strands fluttering in the breeze. She looked like someone who had always belonged here. And maybe, Elrich thought, she always had Dot by midday. Their hands were stained with soil and berry juice. The children were barefoot, smudged with dirt and laughter. Elrich knelt at the edge of a row of twist stalks, brushing sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. Pull from the base, he said gently, guiding Tiva's hands. Not the top? You'll snap the stalk. Like this? She asked, tongue poking out in focus. Twist first, then pull, he said. Like when you open my toolbox, she nodded solemnly. Only this doesn't explode if I do it wrong, right? Correct, he chuckled. Hopefully. I didn't like. When the blue one fizzed, she muttered. That was a plasma cell. Matsari called out, arms full again. And you were told not to touch it. She was helping. Cello defended her, holding up a bunch of bright leaf greens. We were exploring. You nearly shut down the entire grid. But we fixed it. Matsari looked at Elrich across the garden, eyes glittering with amusement. She gets that from you, she said. Elrich raised a brow. Which part? The chaos, she said, smiling. And the charm. They ate that night on the steps of the cabin, backs warm from the heater behind them, stomachs full of fresh greens and boiled firefruit. The sun, weak as it was, washed the clearing in golden light. It wasn't warm, not truly, but it was. No longer punishing. Tiva leaned against Elrich's side, her little legs smeared with dirt, her doll perched on her lap, wearing a makeshift dress fashioned from the infamous blue sock. Cello sat on the other side, whittling again. His carving knife moved with calm precision. Then, softly, like it was any other thought in the world, Tiva asked, Papa? Elrich froze. Matsari turned her head slightly, lips parted, but she didn't stop her. I gave you a berry, Tiva sighed, holding up a stained hand. That means it's real. You're my papa now, right? Elrich looked at Matsari. Her eyes held his calm, warm, and this time without fear. There was no hesitation in them now. No waiting to be told to leave. He swallowed thickly and nodded. If you want me to be. Tiva nodded once, satisfied. I already do. Cello didn't look up from his carving. I've been calling you that in my head for a while, he said. Didn't know if I was allowed. You don't need permission, Elrich said. Then it settled. And it was not with ceremony. Not with grand declarations, but with dirt beneath their nails, a garden behind them, and the sound of a girl calling someone papa, like it was the most natural thing in the universe. Later, when the children went inside to fight over the last piece of dried fruit, Elrich remained on the steps beside Matsari. They sat in silence, watching the sky shift from gray to deeper blue. You always imagine it like this? She asked quietly. He thought about it, then shook his head. I didn't imagine it at all. I never let myself. She smiled. And now? He turned slightly, brushed a kiss to her temple. Now I just get to live it. She leaned into his side, her fingers finding his and curling around them without a word. The past hadn't vanished. The ghosts still lingered. But for once, the future wasn't something to run from. It was something to grow. Just like the garden. Slow, messy, alive. Asterisk. The sunlight on Veltuan 5 had never felt like this before. It spilled through the cabin windows in long, Golden bands filtered. And faint, yes, but real. Warm, like a gentle knock against the soul. The snow outside had receded far enough to reveal the outlines of hills and shadows. Soft slopes marked by new moss and shallow rivulets of meltwater, carving their first timid paths through the earth. Inside, the cabin breathed. There was no other word for it. It was alive now, its walls no longer holding just warmth and silence, but laughter, footsteps, soft voices in the morning, and the clatter of bowls that didn't have to be rationed with fear. Elrich stood at the window, coffee in hand, what little remained in the nearly empty tin. It was weak, mostly memory, but he drank it anyway. He stood quietly as the world outside shimmered, not white and blinding anymore, but blue-tinted and a live dot behind him. Blankets rustled. Tiva was the first to move, as always. She shuffled out of the bed, wrapped in one of Elrich's flannels, dragging her doll by the leg and yawning like the queen of the moon. She didn't say good morning, not to him, anyway. She went straight to the heater, crouched beside it, and placed a hand on its warm side panel. "Thank you, heater," she whispered solemnly. "You're a good thing." Elrich blinked. He hadn't seen reverence like that in decades. Matsari emerged a moment later, her braid half undone from sleep, her movements quiet and smooth as always. She joined Tiva near the heater, crouched beside her, brushing the child's hair back from her face in long, gentle strokes. Cello, still buried under blankets, peeked out only enough to blink and groan, then rolled onto his side with a muttered, "Too early." They had routines now. Unwritten, unspoken things that filled the days. Mornings were for food and warmth. Afternoons for garden work, carving, sorting supplies. Evenings for soup, stories, and the kind of silence that healed instead of hurt. Today was different. It started like all the others. Calm. Clean. But around midday, a hum pierced the air. Faint, high, metallic. Elrich moved to the door instantly, years of reflex kicking into gear. The children froze. Matsari straightened. They all heard it. A ship, not descending, not searching, just passing by high overhead, casting a faint shadow through the sky's blue hue. It was gone in under a minute, but it had been there. Proof that the world beyond Beltuan 5 still spun. That orders were still barked. That somewhere, someone, still fought. Matsari stood behind him. "You're not going to send a signal," she said. It wasn't a question. No. She nodded, arms crossed lightly over her chest. "I came here because I read your file," she said finally. It wasn't random. I knew someone was out here. A man who had lost everything. I thought maybe you'd understand. Elrich didn't answer right away. "You found me because I was lost," he said, voice soft. "Yes." He looked at her, and this time he didn't feel the ache in his chest. He felt the relief. The strange gratitude that someone had seen his name, seen his warning, and still come anyway. That evening, they ate fresh stew from the garden's second harvest. The children argued over who got the biggest twistroot, and Matsari pretended not to smuggle extra bites into Cello's bowl when she thought he wasn't looking. After the meal, Tiva handed Elrich a small bundle of cloth inside, 3 flat stones, painted, one with a scar drawn across the surface, one with white dots for eyes, one tiny with hair made of melted wax string. "I made us," she said, grinning. "Now we don't disappear." Elrich didn't speak. He just nodded and set them on the shelf above the heater. That night, as the lights dimmed and the fire clicked, gently in the corner, Matsari lay in bed beside him, not because she had to, not because of storm or fear, but because she chose to. Her hand found his under the blanket. "I thought I'd have to survive forever," she whispered. "You don't." He said, "They didn't kiss that night. They didn't need to." They breathed, slow and quiet, listening to the stillness together. In the dark, Cello whispered something across the room. Papa? Yeah? Will we stay here always? Elrich hesitated only a second, then said, As long as you want. There was a pause, and a soft, okay, followed by sleep. The cabin rested with them. Outside, the moon that had once howled and clawed and tried to bury every trace of warmth now lay quiet beneath starlight. Inside, between the heater and the shared blankets, 4 people slept. A man who had lost a daughter, a woman who had carried a body across battlefields. 2 children who had never been allowed to grow without fear, and something new, not a squad, not a mission, a family, one that had not been found by searchlights or orders or fate, but by a knock in a storm, a girl's frozen feet, and a voice that whispered, Warmth comes from kind people. And for once, kindness had answered. The end.